You saw the verdict live right here on Fox 61. State Trooper Brian North found not guilty of manslaughter in the deadly shooting of 19-year-old Mubarak Suleiman. The story getting all kinds of national attention after the black teenager was shot multiple times following a police chase in 2020. Joining me this morning to look at the verdict and the upcoming civil trial, legal analyst Ray Hassett. Ray, as always, we appreciate your insight. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure to be here.
This breaking news came down Friday. This whole case evolving in the wake and aftermath of George Floyd's murder and a conviction in that case out in Minneapolis. Not guilty here. Obviously, the circumstances are different, but both getting a lot of attention. What did you make of the verdict Friday?
So the jury actually, I think, again, like the Troconis case, did a very good job at piecing the information and the facts apart to come up with what they needed to. They needed to make a determination as to whether subjectively the officer had a reason to believe that force or deadly force was needed. And then once that officer did make that decision, whether the force that was used was actually appropriate or reasonable in light of the training of a reasonably trained police officer, an objective standard that's required. And the jury ultimately found in favor of the police officer, and that was because the jury found that these facts were established to show that the law was not broken.
And in the wake of that verdict, we heard the judge tell the jurors that this was a very difficult case. What were the complexities as you saw them? What were the challenges?
The challenges were basically to make a determination as to whether the officer acted as a reasonable police officer would. And there was testimony provided by the defense. They brought in experts to show how police officers can perceive things, how they can act, and most importantly, their training. And of course, it all goes back to training. When an officer is involved in a situation like this, it's very difficult. They have to make split-second decisions, and they revert back to their training. So that's really important, as it is in the civil case.
There is a civil case, to your point here. We didn't hear from Brian North on Friday, in part because the civil case is upcoming. What should we make of that?
So the civil case is a different standard. Remember, the criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. The civil case is a preponderance of the evidence. What does that mean? The jury doesn't have, they just have to find a little bit more than 50% of the evidence in favor of one side or the other to make a determination. You remember in the O.J. case that O.J. Simpson was found not guilty on the criminal, but on the civil side was and had to pay millions of dollars. In the civil case, they're looking at different things like, was the officer negligent? Were there other officers there that were negligent? Was the training appropriate? Was there an appropriate command staff set up? And how the actions of the police officers and the town were related to making sure that the law enforcement was done properly.
All right. We know Michelle Troconis will be back in court this week on contempt of court charges. We hope you'll come back and talk about that. As always, we appreciate your wisdom and your insight.
Thanks.